Hello and welcome to a short presentation about how to choose your project for next year. This should be no more than 15 minutes and will just help you to understand the process before the Dissertation Fair. If you have any questions after listening to this, please feel free to get in touch with me at the email address shown. There are two main links involved in this presentation: an allocation system and the self-proposed system. I'll start off with the allocation system. These are all live, obviously not in this presentation, but the slides are available on Blackboard. So if I click on this one, this isn't up to date at the moment, but it's nearly there, and this gives all the staff and their available titles. There'll be a few more by the time you click on this link. So let me just go to one of my own, and here's a particular title here. So you might find if you click on me, you get my page, and if you click on the number here, you get the information about this title. This one gives you just a short information description and references if there's any included. Sometimes I leave that to see myself depending on what's happening, and there may be all these fields filled in. This is the kind of information we would want you to provide if you were going to produce a self-proposed. So you can do this on all these and also click into the staff member as well. The self-proposed system, when you submit a proposal, it'll ask you for your username so it knows who you are. This is the title you think you might want to propose, which is something different from what's on the list. A description of what you think that is, what you're going to be doing, a little bit more information about what you're going to do, and more importantly, how you're going to do it, what we call the methodology. And if this is an academic thing that you're looking at from papers, then you might put some academic references in here. If it's a particularly highly technical thing that you're interested in, you may put some other academic references or some industrial literature in here. Then you select the area it fits under, and then you suggest your supervisor. It will submit. It will say who you are, because this thinks it's me, and then you press submit. Then if that was coming to me, I would get an email, and we would then have a look at whether that was possible. But please speak to staff before you do that, and I'll follow through that system. So the next slide is all the people who are available to supervise staff. It's not all staff, but it's by far the majority. Some of them have got less students, will have less projects than others, depending on what else they're doing this year. And some people are on sabbatical, so they're not available at all. You can use these links as well to get to the staff pages and see their interests. So for instance, you could go into one of the members of staff, look at what they do, what they're interested in, look at their publications, and these might take you to things that you're particularly interested in. So they'll give you some information about the kind of things that you could potentially propose. This is the current list, as close as we can get to it, of who will be taking what numbers of students. They won't all be filled, all these numbers. There's more numbers here than the actual number of students. But likewise, that doesn't mean that if some people aren't full, you can't backfill against that. We're trying to even the staff load between these people within these limits as much as possible. So the system. If you go into the allocation system, you choose 10 titles from different staff and different areas. You can't just choose 10 from one person or 10 from one area. The algorithm then gives a number to each of those choices. So it might say first is worth this many points and 10 is worth this many points. Then it uses a numerical algorithm to try and allocate staff members and their availability and what students are chosen, and tries to minimize that number to try and get as many people up to their first choice, second choice as possible. That isn't always possible, and there are always some people who fall out of this system, who end up with their very low choices, or end up with nothing at all. So we have a system where you choose an area that you're interested in as well. So you might say I'm if I can't get any of these titles, I'm most interested in structures or most interested in geo, and then we will choose a generic or an available title in that area and allocate that to you. If that sounds a bit scary and sounds like you're not going to get your project you want, well, have a look at this graph. This is a typical graph. About a third of people will choose to propose their own, self-proposed as we call it here. It's completely up to you, but obviously that's one way of getting your first choice, because if the one you self-propose isn't your first choice and you've got your title wrong, over 40% got their first choice from the actual algorithm, and then it tails off steeply. But sometimes we do get a scattering in these low choices, or we swap some of these low choices for a generic if it suits students better. To put that in context, this year we have about 180 students to fill 265 effectively places, as in available slots with staff. So it shouldn't be ridiculous to make this fit. So let's go into a little bit more detail now. What happens with an independent research project? No lectures, not a typical kind of module. You have a title and you work closely with an academic to produce your dissertation. It's independent, so the supervisor is just a guide, someone to run things past, not someone to keep asking questions, what do I do next, what do I do next? They're not like that. It allows you to engage with a cutting area of research or cutting area of something that you're particularly interested in. There's a lot of high quality research or interesting things being done by staff. Find out what they are, find out what interests you, and try and either self-propose or choose a title in that area. We have to do this because part of having an accredited degree through the JBM means that you have to have a dissertation, and it needs to be a substantive piece of independent investigative work. And that's how we fulfill this requirement. Sometimes it will mean that you contribute a new piece of engineering knowledge to the world, but very often it's a case of looking at other people's work they've done or working with something that you're not familiar with, and bringing something that's new to you rather than new to mankind. However, it isn't just doing something you've done in a module before. In fact, it can't be that. It has to be something that's new to you, that pushes you out of your comfort zone a little bit. So this map here, or this kind of a diagram, is trying to show you how broad civil engineering is. Obviously, civil engineering is broad, and structural engineering is a subset within civil engineering, you could say. But within that, there's a whole host of different areas. So for instance, you might be interested in the environmental side of things, the physical geography, how things work with the land, environmental chemistry. You might be more interested in technology, more down the side of materials and mechanical engineering. You could be interested in numerical modelling, analysing things, using maths, coding, or you might be interested in how things work socially, the policy side of things, the legal side of things. So all these things are open to a dissertation. The crux of what you have to do is you have to make sure you are collecting some data or creating some data and critically assessing that, and maybe creating something new from the data that's been provided by others, or analysing data that you've created from something. There are substantive themes, so you're aware of geotechnics, structures and water. There's also things like design, architecture and interdisciplinary, where you might have things crossing boundaries which are all acceptable. So what can they be? Well, there could be a lab project. They're quite rare, just a few % of projects are lab based. A lot of them are numerical analysis. That could be code, it could be using bits of software to run different scenarios and look at what would happen in different situations. They could involve all sorts of things, surveys, various methods for collecting data. They could be doing a complicated design for something you've not dealt with before, new materials, or things in a different way. So there are three main types. The first one is something you formulate yourself. That's what we call self-proposed. And that could be of any type in terms of how it works. The other two are, if you go through the list, you'll see things that are very specific by an academic. Go and do this piece of work and tell me what the answer is when you've done it. It may be a hard piece of work to do, but the question has been defined and you've just got to go and do it and find the answer. The last one, C, is something that's a bit more general, where it may sound easy, or I could do that, but you haven't actually got the research question yet, so you've got to do some work to understand, well, within that title, what questions would I actually ask and what would I try and answer and how would I do that? So have a look at the different styles. So from today, what I recommend is you reflect on what your core interests are. This is going to be a big piece of work. You're going to spend weeks and weeks on it with only guidance by staff. So make sure it's something that you're interested about. Look at those titles, see if you feel you can choose 10 that you'd all be interested in doing in. If you think there's something particularly you'd like to research, propose for yourself, then go for that route as well. The timeline of this is from now. You're free to talk to staff. There's a couple of hours set aside at the Dissertation Fair date where you can have virtual video chats. Obviously you can get through to staff by video and by email to discuss things. So you have now all the way through the summer to September to submit your independent proposal. Please don't leave it to the last minute. There's several reasons for this. Staff may be full and have no spaces left for you to submit a proposal. And also, if you do things to the last minute, you might actually find staff want you to do some work to see what the title would include and you haven't got time to do it. If you do that earlier rather than later, you can start from now, for instance. You'll find out whether it's been successful or not via the system. Don't just take a member of staff saying, yeah, that should be okay as a agreement. You'll have to put it in the system and then they'll have to accept that to say, yes, I can see that being a valid dissertation. And then from early June onwards, but before the Friday of first week back next term, if you haven't been successful on the independent proposal or you've chosen not to do that, you can just go and choose your choice of 10. Select from that list, same list as I showed earlier, and then by the end of the first week, everyone will either have had a proposed title accepted, or they will have chosen from a choice of 10, and then we'll run the algorithm within the first couple of weeks of term, and then everyone will know who they're supervising and who their supervisors are. Last few tips: speak to academics before you propose something. Look what they're interested in, make sure there's a connection between what you're doing and the member of staff. They're much more likely to accept that, and they can help you with the feasibility and whether or not labs, etc. are required. You're only allowed to propose one, so propose something, and if that gets rejected you may well be able to propose another one, but you can't propose 6 at once. You'll have questions to answer, as I just showed you when I went through the presentation, and that link again is the same link again to propose your own. So you can look at a lot of information to find out or simulate your interest in what you could actually propose. There's a lot more staff than the people you've been taught in the first few years of your university life, and there's some very interesting projects out there. So please do your research and have a good look round to propose something. Whether it's accepted will depend on how many people ask how many members of staff, whether it's a good quality one, whether they're available to supervise that, and whether or not the support required is available. You will find out from the system whether you've been accepted or not. Please be aware staff have to leave themselves available for at least 2 from the projects of the choice of 10 system, so they may well get filled up before the deadline closes. And if you weren't successful, then you'll have to do the choice from 1 in 10. You may have decided that's what you want to do anyway because you've looked through the list. There's plenty there. Obviously, in most years, over half people do that. When you're doing that, a traffic light system will tell you how many people have already chosen that title. So if there's 30 people already choosing that title, you'll know that your chances of getting that are fairly slim, but still possible. and your chance is the same as anyone else.